Hi everyone, welcome to Cloud Ranger's Microsoft Azure training. This is the 2018 edition. So as you know, I'm Sean Ismail, a Microsoft Azure MVP, and my contact information is below. Today we are going to talk about Introduction to Azure. This is Module 1 and Lesson 2. So this is the overview of Azure. So before I get into any technology, I typically like to actually get some background information of how this service came to be, what this service is about, and be excited about it. And that's what I'm going to try to do in this short lesson today. So let's get started. So Microsoft Azure, this is the cloud computing platform by Microsoft. And it was announced back in 2008 by Microsoft, and it used to be known as Windows Azure. So if you have been working with somewhat of Azure before, you probably know this as Windows Azure. And when Microsoft came out with this service back in 2008, they only offered the platform as a services, right? I mean, there used to be no infrastructure as a service and other stuff that cloud offering from Microsoft uh, has today. So it was only primarily PaaS service, and then they eventually got into it. Today, Microsoft Azure has over 500 cloud services and it's growing. Every other week, we talk about a new preview that Microsoft is talking about. They're making advancements in one, newer technologies, and two, enhancing the technologies and tweaking them and making them better for the existing services they have. So one thing to let you know, like I mentioned in my previous lessons before, that Microsoft Azure is not the only cloud platform out there. Google has their offering. Microsoft, Amazon AWS is the Amazon's offering for the cloud services. So they're not the first player in this cloud computing. There are other people before, and they're not the only one that is there providing the services today. So this is a very brief introduction of what Azure is and what Microsoft is doing about it. So to get into Azure, the first thing we need to talk about is the Azure's data centers. This is where the magic happens. This is where Microsoft provides all those services from. And it's the regions concept is a very important concept when it comes to Microsoft's Azure data centers. Okay, so Azure platform, like some of you already know, is supported by a network of Microsoft managed data centers. You do not have access to these data centers. Microsoft completely manages them for you. So Azure's data centers are located in about 36 geographic locations, and there are a few more in progress that are being built as we speak. And this is, early 2018, and that's the amount of data centers that are there today. So I want to take you to this link to actually show you this, what it means. So these are the various Azure regions that are out there today. So the goal here is to pick up a region that is close to you. So for example, I'm out of Canada. So when I'm, demonstrating anything or doing anything, typically I go and choose the Canada Central region, right? So the green dots that you're seeing over here, these are the regions. These are not necessarily data centers. Each data center may actually have each region may have one or more data centers. So if you actually look at West Central US over here, there might be one, two, three. We do not know how many data centers, but there might be connected data centers in this region. Something you do not have control over because you only select the regions you have. And don't worry about all these URLs. They will be there in GitHub for you for all the URLs I'm talking about. So you can take a look at that and review them at a later time. Okay, so these are all the regions. Typically, you go and pick the region that's close to you and you take it from there. Now, like I mentioned, each region is a geographic group of one or more data centers, and you will find that this is one of the most and first thing that you have to consider when you are trying to provision a cloud service. Okay, it's actually one of the very first considerations you have to make. So if you are trying to create a virtual network or virtual machine, the very first thing you will do is find out that which region you're going to provision that out of. So it's important you go do that. Typically, like I mentioned, you go pick the one that's closest to you. So you may be in a country where there's no data center. So you look around on that map and find out the one that's closest to you and you choose that. The idea is that, anywhere you're provisioning that service, you should be close by to that service. Doesn't mean that I cannot go and provision a virtual machine, somewhere in Europe you can still provide, I mean, you can still provision stuff. Nothing is stopping you because you may be a global organization that may have people coming from all over the place. So it typically doesn't matter. Now, while I say that, I'm being very cautious that it does not matter because you have to understand that not all regions and data centers have all the services. So certain services you'll find out are only located in certain regions. These are not really the primary services. So for example, if it's a virtual machine, you'll find that in all the regions. There's some services, and we'll get to them in later lessons, that are only currently available in specific regions. It doesn't mean that Microsoft is only going to have them out of those regions. They sometimes have preview, which, preview of a technology which is only from a certain region. Eventually, when everything works out, it's tweaked and all the bugs are all squashed, they will deploy that in all the data centers. The ultimate goal from Microsoft is that all services should be present in all regions. So sometimes this is quite important for you if you're thinking about compliancy. For example, in Canada, we have certain organizations who want to always keep all the services within Canada. Let that be for data privacy, let that be for regional, provincial, compliance requirements. So at that time, you have to be careful that, hey, sure, the virtual machine I'm creating from here, but maybe, and I'm totally taking this as an example, maybe the backup service is not provided in the two regions that are there within Canada. That means that you're not going to be compliant, even though your virtual machines are running within the Canadian data centers in the Canadian regions, but the backup is happening elsewhere, right? So you have to be very careful about that when you architect a large solution that requires that kind of consideration. But for our purposes, the stuff that we are doing in the most of the lessons, you can pretty much choose any data center depending on where you are. Okay, so that's something you have to remember. Don't get too carried away with this right now. I mean, we can definitely talk about this later in the later lessons when we talk about specific services that are only available to specific regions for now. Now, the next important thing I want to talk about is the Azure region pairs. So each region that I have showed you is actually paired with another region, which basically means that they have a back end connection between these two regions with the data centers that are there for certain services to work very seamlessly with the highest speed possible. So let me take you to the location. So for example, Canada Central and Canada East are actually paired together. Means certain services like which are geo distributed, they'll be located between these two places. This is for high availability and failover and things like that. Some of these considerations are already made for you. And while Microsoft actually provides this regional pair, they actually take care of your requirements that you may have for disaster recovery. So if I have something located in Canada Central, and I'm doing a geo-redundant service, Microsoft in the backend will actually provision those redundant services on the Canada East data centers, and it will be quite seamless for me, something I wouldn't have to worry about, but because Microsoft is taking care of that. So this is another website where I'm talking about the Azure paired regions. I mean, this is what Microsoft's thing is, that this is a regional pair. So like I was mentioning, Canada East, Canada Central, this is the one region. There might be one or multiple data centers here. They will have a pairing with the other region. So they have a very nice list over here. So if you are, for example, in Japan, you will know that Japan East and Japan West are the ones that are paired together. Sometimes these are quite simple because for Canada, for example, we know these are the only two regions that are there. For Japan, it is easy as well because Japan East and Japan West. But let's say you are in USA, you would have to actually go through this list and find out that which are the ones that are paired. For example, in North America, in East US, it's actually paired with West US over here, right? East US 2 is with Central US. So this is a list that's from Microsoft that actually tells you the geographic region and the paired regions. So, you can well imagine if there is a region, the region East US is not paired with East US 2 because maybe they're too close together, and Microsoft thought to provide the best redundancy and the shortest distance possible, as well as maintain the distance for the disaster recovery in between. It is easier to pair East US with West US because it will solve that requirement. So do follow this list from this URL to find out what's your paired regions. And this page over here actually gets into much more details about what is going on with these paired regions when you bring up certain services, how they are paired together. Okay, and it gets into perfect description of everything else over here, and it's part of the BCD, which is the Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery, BCDR. Okay, so this is something definitely you have to talk about. Now, Microsoft has created this video, and it gives you a very high-level overview of how their data centers are built, what they're doing in the data center. I suggest you go to this link over here and look at the Microsoft Data Center tour. Like, take a tour. It's like a virtual tour in their data center. They show you around. It's very beautifully done, and I suggest you do that. And this is where you get excited about this technology, right? You know, what's happening in the back end. Yes, I go somewhere on the cloud and spin up a virtual machine, but you know, where exactly and how exactly these things are located. I mean, it's really beautiful, and I'm very excited about it, as you can understand, because in this video they actually show that how Microsoft's all these servers come in large containers already pre-built, and all the connectivity and everything else is all there. It's very modular. It takes the container, hooks it up to the rest of them, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good to go. And you know, it's come down to a science where Microsoft is doing this at a very large scale. So feel free to go and look at the store, and you know, it will start making some of the theoretical concepts we are talking about a little bit more clear. Now, this will be probably one of the most important things you will do at least once or twice. If you're in an organization, it will be a little different, or it can be a little different from how you will go today and sign up to, you know, practice or look around all these services. So Azure itself is primarily organized by Azure's accounts and subscriptions. Okay, so you will always have an account that you will have to create to consume any Azure cloud services. That's the first thing you create. You have to remember that each account that you have can have multiple subscriptions. So just because you have one account does not mean you have one subscription. You can have multiple subscriptions. And once I go there, I'll tell you why you may need multiple subscriptions. So the primary account delegates privileges at the subscription level. So the first account that you created and signed up for Microsoft Azure, the subscription that you create or multiple subsequent subscriptions that you will be creating in the future, you will remember that the account that you created becomes your primary account. And that's the account that will provide the privileges to the other subscriptions and other admins that will be created there. The account administrator is the user created with the account. So when you create an account, let's say you are going to sign up with at Hotmail or Gmail or Live or Outlook.com or even an organizational account, that becomes your organization's or your personal account administrator. This account administrator has a lot of power, as you will see. First of all, it has access to the Azure's Account Center. In Account Center, you can actually go and see all the subscriptions that are associated with your account. For demonstration purposes, I will have one account with one subscription in there or two subscriptions in there. When you go and create an account today, or if you had one from before, you can actually go to account.azure.com and see the subscriptions that are there today. If you are an organization, you may see actually multiple subscriptions there. This account administrator or this account can create the billing method. So when you sign up personally, you provide a credit card, right? And all the charges will be actually out of this credit card. There are several other billing methods. Obviously, if you're an organization, you probably don't want to do this with a credit card. You'll do it with a PO where they bill you or invoice you at the end of the month. Anyways, the account administrator can go and set up the billing method. The account administrator can also go and create or cancel subscriptions. Like I mentioned, account is the top umbrella when it comes to the other subscriptions. So this account holder or this account administrator can actually provision subscriptions or it can cancel subscriptions. It can also create and change the subscription level administrator. So you're the account holder or the account administrator, you create a subscription. Now you want another administrator to only go at the subscription level and administer that, so you can go and create that administrator. So Azure account is very important. Typically, large organizations will have one account and that will be held by someone at a very high level or someone from accounting and finance, and they will actually go and create subscriptions for you, or you can help them create the subscription for you, ensuring that at the subscription level, you have the full administrative privilege and you can do things there, okay? So that's the account we are talking about. Now, let's get into the subscriptions a little bit. Now that you have the account, you created a subscription, that's where you create the Azure services. This is where actually you go in and spin up your virtual machines, network, or websites, or whatever you need to do. To consume Azure services, you have to have a subscription. And like I mentioned, this subscription can be personal or organizational. So there is a two school of thoughts here, right? Like I have people who come and say, hey, I created for my organization this account with my organizational account or personal account. Can my organization go and put stuff there? Absolutely. If they're paying for it and the billing method is right, they probably don't want you to pay from your credit card. You can actually hook up your organization's credit card over there. But since you're the account holder, like I mentioned, you can change those billing methods, right? And you can transfer to their credit card and make sure that's the account. The signing up process for the personal and organizational is very similar. It does not matter where you're going to sign up. I'll show you briefly where you can go do that, but it can be done in the same place. The only difference is, and this is where the confusion started, is the organization can have a different sign up place. And what happens in that different sign up place is that every time you go and create an account, that actually it actually takes that email address and creates your tenant ID. Okay, uh, I'm not going to get into the details of the tenant ID and everything else right now, but what happens is you created that account, a tenant ID has been created for you. So it will be the tenant ID dot on Microsoft.com. And when a tenant ID is created, it actually creates an Azure Active Directory in the backend to manage all the other accounts that you'll be creating for your subscriptions and everything else. Some organizations think that that tenant ID is important. So for example, if I'm Cloud Ranger, I probably want my tenant ID to be cloudranger.onmicrosoft.com. That tenant ID, since it's attached to Azure Active Directory, like the on-premises Active Directory domain name, some organizations want that to be not random and to be a little bit more precise. That's why when you sign up as an organization, there's a separate URL for you to sign up so you can actually go and select that tenant ID for yourself. And I'll show you that in a bit. Don't worry about it if you don't understand a great details about it. I'm going to go through somewhat of a sign up process and you can see what I mean over there. Subscriptions have isolation of administration and billing. So this is when I tell you about why you may need multiple subscriptions. Okay, let's say you have an organization, you created that account. Now you have the IT department, they come and say, hey, we need our subscription. You go and give them your subscription. Within the IT, let's say now the development team comes and says, hey, we need the developers, to go and, do stuff in their, to go and do stuff in there. Now, what you may be able to do here is create two separate subscriptions rather than an IT subscription. You may have a subscription that holds all your production stuff that you don't want everybody to have access to. And you may create a separate subscription where developers go and develop and test their stuff. You do not care if somebody by mistake goes and deletes everything in that subscription, because essentially deleting anything in your subscription may take down your entire data center on the cloud, right? So you need some governance there. And this is the word that's important in this whole subscription thing, that how do you govern this, all of this stuff. So your CTO or CIO or VP of IT may want to govern this in such a way that different groups get their subscription, not only for the isolation, but for also the billing purposes. Like I need to know how much my developers are spending on Azure to do their development work versus I need to also go and see what my production stuff that I'm provisioning on Azure is costing me. So different subscription can have isolation of administration as well as billing. So I know this is how much my production costs, my development costs, a specific project costs. Could we have put them all together in one subscription? Absolutely. Microsoft has their, resource groups right now, which can actually function very much in this way. But typically, governance, they try to keep things in separate subscriptions to make them a little bit more unique for accounting purposes as well, because it makes the billing a lot simpler. And if you're an organization, part of an enterprise agreement, you probably can get a dev test subscription all by itself for your developers. That actually has a different cost model because just you're going and developing there, Microsoft, doesn't charge you as much as it would do in a production environment. So that is something important to think about. But for our purposes, if you're an individual watching this lesson today, you want to go sign up, don't worry about it. You go and you get the trial subscription up and running, I mean, trial account created. It will create a trial subscription for you for, I believe, 90 days or 60 days. And you don't have to worry about all this. But if you are an organization, you need to put a lot more thought into how your account is going to be created, who's going to be the account holder, who's going to create the subscriptions, who are the administrators. There's stuff to think about there. Now, subscriptions also have another thing. They have quotas and limits. So each subscription, and I have put the link over there, each subscription, you will have a specific quota and limit. This prevents from something wacky happening in there, right? So let's go and say that you need 1 million virtual machines, and each virtual machine will have, like, 8 cores. That's 8 million cores. You are able to do that, but your subscription will prevent you from doing that, because each subscription will say that, hey, you can only have this many virtual machines with this many cores in there. Now, by default, there are certain quotas and limits that I want to show you from their website. So if you actually go to Azure subscription here, this is the link that's I put over there, which is the Azure subscription service limits, quotas, and constraints. So if you're practicing stuff, this is not a big deal, right? I mean, it will most probably have most of the stuff that you want to do. So look at this. By default, when you create a new subscription, you can only have cores per subscription, only 20. Now you may be like, Sean, if I'm going to do this in production, I'll need definitely more than 20, cores for all my virtual machines. So that's only the default limit. If you try to do more than 20, it will stop you. But you can open up a quick ticket from the portal itself and contact Microsoft and say, hey, I'm trying to put production stuff and I need like 100 or 150, 200, up to 10,000 cores, depending on what I'm trying to do. And can you remove my default limit and let me go further? They'll ask you a basic question. Hey, what are you trying to do? Ensuring that they're not speeding up stuff just for you to do random stuff that you do not know what you're doing about. Like if you try to go and say, hey, I need 5,000 cores, they will ask you about it. I mean, it's not like they don't want to give it to you, but they'll be like, are you sure you want 5,000 cores in one subscription? Nothing stops you from doing that, but just want to make sure that you know what you're doing. And if you go and say, yes, I know what I'm doing, they'll allow that. But then after 10,000, you will need a separate subscription to do that. There are a lot of organizations who may have that requirements, and at that point, you create up a different subscription and you go spin up things over there. So that's just the core. There's a lot of items over here that you need to look into, like reserved IP stuff here. You can have 10,000 virtual machines per region. That is the default limit as well as the maximum limit. So if you want to make more than 10,000 virtual machines in one specific region, Microsoft is just not going to allow you to do that per subscription. So go through this list, and I have put the link in GitHub. Go through this list and see the stuff that may be important for you. For practice purposes and everything else that we are doing today, it's most likely not super important for you, because anything that we do, a couple of virtual machines here and there, you don't have to worry about that, right? Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the two roles. So you have uh, created an administrator when you're creating that account, right? So that account person is becoming your default administrator. At the subscription level, you can actually have two roles. One is the service administrator and another is the co-administrator. So the service administrator has full access to the subscription and can go and do everything that subscription has there to provide. The co-administrator has the same thing as the service administrator, except that the co-administrator, some of you might be able to guess, cannot go and create or delete a service administrator because they're like the co-administrator, but they have similar privileges like the service administrator has. In fact, in the newer subscription, resource model subscriptions, based subscriptions in the newer portal, there's also the RBAC, or the role-based access control. So you can actually have users that the service administrator and the co-administrator can create, who have very specific roles to perform. Like there might be a low-level admin you have who you are just going to allow to remote into the virtual machines, and that's about it. Go restart or shut down a virtual machine. Depending on various roles, there's tons of roles in there. You can be very specific on what they're going to do. Okay, so I'm not going to get into super details. I'll leave that for the demo in the next lesson. But for now, you have to remember accounts and subscriptions are very important. And I'm going to give you a brief demo. I'm not going to get into details of actually going and signing up. I'm going to show you that where you are going to go and create your account for both yourself or the organization. And I'm hoping that while you're going through these lessons, you will do one for yourself so you can practice along. Okay. All right, now that I'm at my computer here, the site that we really want to go to is azure.microsoft.com. This is your primary Azure website. This is where you can go and find information, documentation, as well as sign up from here. So if you are a new individual that's just trying out Azure, you do not have an account, this is where you want to start. Go to Start Free. And what this is basically trying to take you to is a sign up place where you're going to log in with your Microsoft account. Now, your Microsoft account can be a hotmail.com, live.com, outlook.com. It can even be a gmail.com if it's already associated as a Microsoft account. And it can also be an organizational account like yourcompany.com or .net or whatever. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this process and show you how to do this. It's a very straightforward registration, but do remember that you do need a cell phone where they will send you a text message of some sort to get the confirmation number, and you will need a credit card information that you need to put in there. So the good part is that you just need the credit card information for this trial. They are not going to charge your credit card for this trial during the trial period, and they send you an email before the trial expires to keep telling you that, hey, your trial is going to expire and we are not going to auto renew this if you don't go and renew this yourself or make it a pay as you go account. So if you actually create this and forget, it's not going to go and start charging your credit card after like 60 days or 90 days, whatever. The thing that I really wanted to show you over here is that this sign up is you as an individual. Now we were talking about organizational account. This is what it is. This is the other URL where, I mean, similarly, when you sign over here with a Microsoft account, you will see something similar. You can come over here and say that this is actually for an organization. And I'll tell you what is the difference here. The sign up is similar. So let's go and say I put in my name, my whatever, Sean at cloudranger.net, my email, and it's optional for the organizational name. So as you can see, it took my first name and last name and put an on Microsoft.com. When you sign in individually, it basically takes your email, I mean your first name, last name, and your email, and creates something random over here for your domain name, right? This is something as an individual you don't care about. Even as an organization, you may not care about. But most organizations probably want this a little bit more interesting. Like they probably want, let's say, I want Cloud Ranger 1234, because this is no different from the domain name that you put internally for your Active Directory, right? So it's actually taking this entire URL and creating an Azure Active Directory in the backend, a very light version which will actually take care of your credentials and everything else. So you check your availability just like a domain name, and you put your user ID. So as you can see, the first user, this is going to be the account holder. And look at this. You can go to this little question marks integration signs over here. It says that, this will be the user that will be the account that will be created to sign into your account. So let's go and say that I'm going to be Sean. So from now on, I'm going to be Sean at cloudranger1234.onmicrosoft.com. Depending on your company name, whatever it is, it will be over here. If you're a personal account, they don't give you this option, but it will pick up something random from your name and put it there. And for most purposes, you should not have to worry about that. This is what I was talking about earlier, right? I mean, it will send you a text message to actually confirm that, this is you who is signing up for that. This process is very similar to your personal one that you'll be creating over here, right, guys? So I'm not actually going to follow through this. Once you have verified with that little code that they send you, the number you send, this will actually highlight and it will allow you to go forward, enter your payment information. Okay, so this is how you will basically sign up now to get that trial, to go through this process. And I'll tell you other ways to actually go and get a subscription when I actually go further from the slides that we have here. Okay, so moving on. So that was like the basic, a very, very high level overview of how you would go and sign up today for your account and then get your subscription. So when you create the account, a subscription will be created for you. So if you're an organization, it will not do that. But if you're individually going and signing up, it will already create a subscription for you and say, hey, we're giving you out from the get-go because we know that you are signing up for Azure, and without a subscription, you cannot do anything. So you do not have to explicitly go and create a subscription. The first account will be the account administrator. It will create a subscription and make you the service administrator as well. And since it's your personal one, you don't have to worry about adding other people, but for most purposes, that'll be it. So I do want to get a little bit into the Azure billing, right? I mean, if you're on a trial, you don't have to worry, but if you're viewing this and doing it for your organization, there's a lot more involved here. So Azure billing, it's a pay-per-use utilization model. Okay, so it's a pay-as-you-go model. When you sign up today for the trial, it's not going to charge you, but it will provide you a limit of $120, $180 per month or something like that. It will still charge that trial amount, or if you sign with your credit card and actually go pay for it, it will actually start charging you every month. It's a pay-per-use model, means if you create a virtual machine, it will actually bill you per minute on that virtual machine. So there is a calculator on the site, Azure site, which tells you how much each of these resources cost you, and I'll show you that in a bit. But it's a pay-as-you-go model. Like it's like your utility bill or your telephone bill. Like it does not cost you anything upfront, but then the more you use your electricity or water or anything else, heating, it charges you for that utilization, and it's per minute. Okay, so if you have a virtual machine which you have only up for a demo for like 20 minutes or so and you turn it off, you only get charged for that 20 minutes. There is no upfront commitment or anything like that. Okay, so it's a pay-as-you-go model. If you're in an organization, it's a little different. In an organization, you can also go as a pay-as-you-go model. But if you're an enterprise agreement customer, which large organizations are, you have certain ways to actually pay less than the market price or the um, pricing that's provided to you on the Azure website. So you can go and say that I want a compute pre-purchase plan. What that means is, let's say, for my demo purposes, I create a virtual machine and I pretty much turn it off and delete it after I'm done because I don't need it. But if you're an organization, let's say you need 30 virtual machines, you're always going to have it up and running. It's going to run 24/7. It's going to run 24/7. It's going to run throughout the year, 365 days, and you're not going to do anything about it. So you know that your utilization is going to be throughout the year and you don't want any downtime or you'll not be really turning it off. So you can make a commitment through your enterprise agreement with a pre-purchase plan saying that I need this 30 virtual machines for the entire year. I still want this as an utilization model, but I'm making a commitment upfront saying that I'm going to be using this for 365 days. What Microsoft then will do is they can provide you up to 50% or 60%, depending on your negotiating capability with your Microsoft representative, to actually go reduce that and say, okay, you know what? Your 30 virtual machines would have cost you so much if you just go as a pay-per-use utilization. We are going to actually take that entire amount, find out what that amount is, and we are going to take 50% off or 40% off, and we are going to give you that pricing because you are making upfront commitment to us that you will be utilizing that for during that entire duration. Right, so it gives you a little bit more purchasing power going and saying, I know this. And I keep talking about virtual machine. Cloud is more than just infrastructure as a service and virtual machine. It's overall services. But there are certain things like a virtual machine, that you can make that commitment, right? I mean, it could be other things too. It could be, without getting into too much details, it could be Azure SQL, which is basically a platform as a service option rather than creating an entire SQL. You may be able to make some commitments over there as well, say that, hey, my database server is going to be Azure PaaS database, and how much is it going to cost me if I do an utilization model versus if I make an upfront commitment, right? And there is also another one, which is Azure Hybrid Benefit. What this means is that you can go and say, hey, I'm making a commitment or I'm making a plan of taking my on-premises data center stuff and putting it in your Azure cloud. Microsoft will help you with some licensing costs and everything else because they want to encourage you to get more into their cloud offering, right? So they may be able to provide you some hybrid benefit there as well. The other way to actually go take care of your billing and everything is through a Microsoft reseller. Like if you're in an enterprise, you get your licensing through someone, I'm assuming. So if you are doing your enterprise agreement and true up and all those things, you can go to your reseller and ask you to provide cloud services. So Microsoft provided this CSPs or cloud service providers who can actually sell Microsoft services on behalf of Microsoft. So it's essentially going to be similar portal and everything else, except that your billing is tied to the reseller and not Microsoft directly. And you may have options to talk to various resellers and get your best pricing. Okay, so if you're an individual just watching this, don't worry about these things. These are really for enterprise people, some of these languages and everything around there. But if you're an enterprise folks, do remember that there's a stuff for you to negotiate from a pricing point of view, which, we will probably not worry about for most of the people who are just trying it out. And, because you won't be able to have that kind of leverage to go and negotiate with Microsoft for a virtual machine you have running for an hour or two here and there for practicing. Now, the other way you can get your Microsoft account and subscription is through benefits. So if you're in an organization and you have an MSDN subscription, which you really should as a developer or as an IT professional, your organization probably has your Visual Studio account or whatever through an MSDN. So every MSDN user, I think it's $120 right now or $160, don't quote me, but you may be able to get through the MSDN subscription free $120 or something like that every month. Okay, so after your trial expires, if you are an MSDN subscription owner, you can go and get that. And most organizations who is working with Microsoft technology should have that. And now, if you're a Microsoft partner, for the folks out there, I don't have to explain to you, as a partner, you get monthly credits as well from Microsoft to go try Azure out. Okay, so from a billing perspective and how this is going to be charged, that's how it is. Now, I do want to talk about Azure services. And the thing that I wanted to talk about here is that these are like the categories of Azure services that I could find. So you have categories of compute, which is virtual machines and containers, things like that. You have networking, you have storage, web and mobile. You have containers, databases, analytics, artificial intelligence and machine learning, Internet of Things or IoT, enterprise integrations, security and identity, developer tools, and management tools. So these are all the services Microsoft provides today. If you take all of them together, it's roughly about 500 and a little bit more total services that fall in all these categories. Okay, when you, depending on what you're trying to do in the cloud, you'll probably be using one thing or the other, but that's what they are categorized under. Maybe tomorrow there'll be something called virtual reality. I do not know. They'll probably create a new category. So the URL that I provided over here, I want to actually take you over there to actually show you all the Azure services that are there. So this is the URL, the Azure product. So if you remember, I took this category actually from here. So if you go to compute, you can see there's talk about virtual machines, app services, batch. This is how it collects to 500, right? I mean, each of these categories have tons of things in here that fall under that category. So when we talk about Azure Compute, these are all the services that we are talking about. When we are going and talking about networking, it scrolls down. You can see these are all the things that we are talking about. So like virtual network, something I keep referring to because people will be most familiar with this, but there's a lot more than just virtual network in Azure's networking services, right? We're talking about traffic managers, DNS, CDNs, VPN gateway, DDoS protection, network watcher, like there are tons of things, load balancers. So each of this category will have a lot of things that will be there. I think it's a good idea for you to come to this website and check this out at your leisure, right? I mean, when I say, storage in Azure Cloud Services, what does it really mean? You can actually click one of this. Like if you go to Azure Storage, it will actually take you to the storages page, have a little intro video, what it's talking about. But the most important thing is it will actually take you to the documentation, right? You can click on documentation. There you go, bam. You have Azure storage documentation. Starts telling you step-by-step tutorials, how, everything that can happen in Azure storage. So take your time. I'm not going to go and read all of this for you, but for your exam, you don't have to go through all this 500, but you need to have a basic idea about all these things that mean, the important services that you'll be using, and go and check that. Like, this is a very interesting one, Azure Compute's batch service, which is cloud scale job scheduling and compute management. For people who want to do a lot of batch processing, this might be a good thing for you to go and look into, right? Yeah, so like that, go through the services, take your time, get excited about things that are there. And this is where I talked about in my previous lessons. This is where you go and get a very brief idea about the overview of this stuff, you'll be so surprised that if you read documentation now, or if you're reading an article on in general cloud computing or talking to your colleagues about, it will start all making sense, right? What does this mean? What can this do? In our lessons over here that we'll be going through, I'll definitely be talking more and more about some of the services that are required for your 7533 services, but it's not going to be all of them, right? But in your day-to-day work, that's my goal, that you learn some stuff from here that you can implement in your day-to-day work. This might be very valuable. So going back to our slides, the next thing I want to talk about over here and give you a brief overview is the Azure management tools. Okay, this is important. This is how you interact with Azure services. I'm not going to get into a demonstration today to keep this video short, but in the next lessons, we'll actually get into the details of some of this and how we are going to start utilizing this. So the most important one is the Azure Portal. So portal.azure.com, this URL will take you to the Azure Portal. This is where we will be spending a lot of time spinning up virtual machines in our subscriptions or virtual machines, networks, whatever, right? Any cloud service. This is where we'll be spending most of our time. There's a classic portal there too. So if you have been using Azure for a while, this is where we used to go before Azure Resource Manager or ARM came into play. If you have been watching my previous videos, before the 2018 edition, we spent a lot of time on this URL. We are not going to spend much time or any time at all, actually, that now I can think of in that URL because we are going to do everything with the brand new stuff that Azure has in the Azure ARM portal, which is portal.azure.com. This is the classic web GUI graphical user interface where we go and do stuff. Then we will be spending significant amount of time also in Azure PowerShell. So everything that you can do in Portal and more, right? That's the key term, and more can be done in the PowerShell because this is where the coding is coming in. You can code scripts in PowerShell to actually go provision the entire thing for you. In fact, we work with organizations where we have entire data center all coded in PowerShell, so a developer can take and run that PowerShell with one line command, and the entire data center will be built up for that person to go and start, doing their code changes or going and developing something. These developers don't care about the infrastructure. They just care about getting that infrastructure, making sure everything is installed so they can go practice or test their coding and everything else. So you can do that entire thing on PowerShell. Total automation or DevOps comes in here. And PowerShell is primarily for the Windows folks. So if you're on the Linux side or the open source side, you use the Azure CLI. And right now the version is 2.0, and it used to be called in different names before, but Azure CLI is for the open source folks. So you can be on a Linux shell, you can script the whole thing out and use the Azure CLI to do that. Now, the thing that I'm excited about is the Azure's Cloud Shell. So that means that when you are going to the portal, obviously you can just go to these URLs. For PowerShell, you have to, on your Windows machine, go install the Azure's PowerShell modules, right? For CLI, you need to go on your Linux, let the VM or apt, depending on the flavor, you need to go and install the CLI. On the portal itself, which is portal.azure.com, Microsoft now gives you access to a cloud shell, means the CLI is already installed for you. The PowerShell is already installed for you. So basically, you just click a button and the shell opens up, and you can just basically go and type in your code or command lines or commandlets, and you can, bam, start using that without installation. So we'll be spending some time depending on what we are doing on the cloud shell as well. And the last one, at the most, it doesn't get as much focus, but with developers is very important, is that you can do all of these tasks from your Visual Studio. Obviously, there's way you can actually create .NET framework programs which will interact with Azure directly through Azure's SDK, and you can do stuff in there as well. So Visual Studio is another management tool. We'll be using actually quite a bit of that when we are doing the platform as a service, and we can do that. So there is a running joke that we all the time have, like, before the infrastructure folks or sysadmins, they'd never open up Visual Studio. But you know what? When we are going to do the ARM templates, and this is the newer stuff without getting into details, the Azure Resource Manager stuff, you actually write JSON scripts in Visual Studio well, you could be writing them anywhere, JSON scripts, but you can write JSON scripts in Visual Studio and you can deploy from Visual Studio. So it's very weird to now actually go and talk with sysadmins and other people who have Visual Studio open in front of them and they're scrambling to, to learn how to go and work and familiarize themselves with Visual Studio. So you can actually get Visual Studio for free. It's a community edition right now. Download it and look around. Don't get into details. I mean, we will definitely go into much details when we get to those scripting part. But yeah, if you're a sysadmin type of person, you are going to start using Visual Studio and, pretty much using the same tools. The developers have been using that for a while. Okay, so that's the management tools we'll get into. So the next lesson that's going to come up, we are going to start using some of these tools, and I'm going to give you a demo on the portal and PowerShell and everything else over there. But for today, to keep this short, that was an overview of Azure, what's happening in Azure, how the billing is happening, how to sign up, the accounts, the subscriptions, limitations and quotas. Like this is a very high-level overview of Azure, but a little bit more detailed than the previous lessons that we had. Okay. Okay, so now that you know Azure a little bit, in the next lesson, we're going to deep dive in and get on the portal and do a couple of stuff and familiarize yourself with the tools of the trade and get started from there. Okay, so that's it for today, folks. The training site that's the location. You're probably watching this on YouTube right now. I'm going to post the slides there. My Twitter handle, all the links and all the assets for this current lesson will be on the GitHub, so don't forget to go and check that. This is where you'll actually find all the links and everything. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, that's the location. So thank you for viewing, and don't forget to subscribe and like the videos. If you have any comments, obviously put them in there and I'll try to interact with you over there. All right. Thank you.